Hello, everybody, and welcome to the WAQ Show. Today, I'll be your host, Dan, and here with me is... That's
TJ.
Oh, there it is.
And Matt, see, okay, here's what I thought was happening. I thought it was like a circle. Dan usually ends and TJ begins, so after Dan should be TJ. But I think TJ was like, Matt always goes second.
Yeah. Which, now I have to go back and listen to how we did it, but I think you usually go second.
I do usually go second, but I'm also right in that if you use it as a circle, it's TJ, Matt, Dan. So after Dan would be TJ.
See, this is the problem with the real world. We need a structured initiative system determined every combat by rolling d20s and adding our...
I'm completely
Anyway.
down to begin episodes with a rolled determination of who intros the episode.
Keep things mixed up. Anyway, with that joke, we're talking about Pathfinder again. We're finishing this out, 3 episodes, a little bit longer than I was hoping for, but, you know, we get into stuff. It's what we do here.
Oh, yeah.
Now you know how One Piece happened.
Yeah. Still shorter than One Piece. I think that's going to be our goal every time.
Yep. No more 5.
Okay. So last time I'm just going to jump right into it.
Yeah.
Last time we finished talking about Wrath of the Righteous and all of the fun character stuff we had going on with that campaign. So the next AP is one called Mummy's Mask. And just to bring us back to the timeline here, which, wow, this came out way later than I thought it did. This released February 2014 through July 2014. And basically this one I prepared to play, so I know like the first book of it, but I'm not super familiar with the whole plot. It has something to do with an ancient Osirian Egyptian, for those who don't know the world, pharaoh had his basically his mind and his soul, his id and his ka, I believe is how the adventure path talks about it, trapped into 2 different pieces of his like ceremonial burial stuff because he was just such a stupidly powerful wizard. And there's a secret organization in Osirian that's actually trying to collect the 2 pieces that have his soul and his mind in them and take his powerful knowledge, or bring him back, something along those lines. And part of the issue with this is, oh yeah, it's a cult that worships him as a god king. Part of the issue with this is, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe he is part of a group called, it's like the 4 mathematical pharaohs or some shit like that. It's kind of weird. But basically, the golden era of Osirian was ruled by 4 pharaohs that, for some reason, seem to have like this insanely intelligent minds and were able to figure out all of these mathematical differences and equations and stuff like that, which gave way to beautiful architecture and technological advancement and even advancements in magic. And this is a spoiler, but I'm gonna talk about it. They cut a deal with the eldritch deities, the dark gods and forces in space, which is the Lovecraftian shit. That gave way to some pretty bad shit on the face of Golarion. It's super interesting, and I love the shit out of it.
My gut reaction is, what a bunch of assholes.
But he did what he did for the betterment of society. I figured you'd be all for this, Matt.
I mean, really,
Which is really... Go ahead, Matt.
I was gonna say, I'm all about doing what is necessary for the betterment of all. But it doesn't sound like it worked out, and so in the end he was wrong. An attempt for the betterment of all is worthless. It has to actually work, or you're just an asshole.
Oh, okay. Mummy's Mask is not about one of those 4. It's about Hakotep the First, who is at current time a forgotten pharaoh. So The story's not about him, but that is in lore in the world, and I could do a whole episode on that. So we're not
And
gonna.
I find it funny that Matt isn't for it because I was for it.
You guys just totally flipped. But it's actually a really cool adventure path. Speaking particularly for book 1, it's got this very Tomb Raider-y vibe. Like, holy shit. If you like Tomb Raider or Indiana Jones, it is an AP that you will enjoy, provided you have a DM that's flexible. It's really fun. I'm kind of bummed I never got to play it. One of my goals was to play through all of the Pathfinder First Edition adventure paths, but pretty much like 90% of the people I play with have moved to Pathfinder 2E, so I either need to convert it or I'll never play it, so we'll see. But that's Mummy's Mask. God, I feel like another round of these in, 50 episodes of WAQ where we just talk about the countries could be a good one too. Anyway.
Yeah.
The next AP, August 2014 to January 2015, is Iron Gods, which takes place in a small country called Numeria. This is your sci-fi meets fantasy AP, for sure. So on the surface, the country of Numeria is kind of barbaric, warlordy style. I think it's modeled slightly off of ancient Mongolia and maybe even that central eastern region with like Afghanistan, Iran, stuff like that. It's very like warlord kind of driven, small community stuff. But at the center of it, there's a capital, kind of like Kabul or... Man, my history sucks this morning. Capital of ancient Mongolia, probably Genghis Khan land. Anyway, it's very much like that on the surface, and it's driven by might is right, power is in rule, stuff like that. But in reality, there's a group called the Technic League that is kind of these puppet shadow masters pulling the strings on all of these barbaric tribal leaders. And the reason they're called the Technic League is because they are in power secretly through technology. Specifically, the technology of giant spaceships that have crashed in Numeria. That are kind of buried underground, and like this is where they introduced androids as a playable race, and they started playing around with like science fiction technology. Like I think in part of the AP, I've only vaguely skimmed this one. In part of the AP, I think you get like a like damaged laser pistol basically, and I think there's a laser sword, and they're just like super OPS weapons, but you need them to beat the like robots and shit on the spaceship that you go look into. It's super interesting mesh. I've heard good and bad things about this one in general. Again, most of the experience you have with an AP comes down to who you're playing it with and who's running it for you. But it has the potential to be good, is what I've heard.
I was gonna say, it sounds fun.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I definitely want to play an android in that someday. I think that would be super fun. Karakorum.
Oh, that was
There you
okay.
It would have driven me insane, so I looked it up for you.
Thank you. This was the one where you and John wanted to do duo characters.
So
yeah.
I believe this is the one that starts out like you go and investigate a air quotes meteor, which is actually a crashed spaceship.
Like I said, I vaguely looked into this.
And so me and John he wanted to be a researcher that pretended not to be a researcher, and I would be his android assistant that pretended not to be his assistant. As two other members found the ship, and we were like, "Oh, what's this? We found it too."
Nice. But just part of the description is, yet something worse than brutish berserker or super science wizard has risen to power in these hidden technological halls. So it's a good one. If you've got people who like sci-fi but also enjoy playing fantasy setting and stuff, it's a nice mesh, I think. Which honestly, I feel that's kind of hard to do. So, good on you, Paizo. The next one, February 2015 to July 2015, is Giant Slayer. This one, Matt and I both played through with his wonderful witch Staffir and my barbarian Valdak. Oh, my sweet, sweet Valdak. So, a little bit about the AP. This takes place by and large in the region of the Mindspin Mountains, which is this huge mountain range that kind of separates this land called the Hold of Belkson, which is kind of the orc country. Just orc tribes run amok through it, and their capital is there. It's a very savage, kind of dry, red clay, deserty land. And these mountains kind of cut that off from a large chunk of other smaller countries to the southeast of it. I'm blanking. What's the country that you started in this one, Matt?
In which one?
Giant Slayer.
We start in the town of Trunau in the Hold of Belkson.
Trunau's in Belkson?
Yeah.
Oh shit, it is. All right. Well, then it takes place in there, but you're on the border with Lastwall. That's what it was.
You're pretty close.
You're on the border with Lastwall, which is like a country of paladins defending against hordes of undead and orcs at the same time. So, yeah, it's interesting. But sorry, I lost my reference page here. There we go.
That would be an unlucky post to get posted at.
Most of them want it.
Most of them have been born into it or are seeking glory for it. Yeah, like Lastwall is one of those situations where they are freakishly patriotic, and that is why they are able to do what they do. It's almost zealotry, which is interesting. Like, I think I would argue Lastwall is more zealous in what they do than Mendev, which is the country fighting the demons flooding into Golarion from a tear that we talked about in Wrath of the Righteous. I think
I could see that making sense.
It's interesting. But anyway, so you start in this small sleepy town of Trunau, and it gets attacked by some orcs and giants and shit. And you go off on this adventure to figure out why the hell they would do that, because there was something strange about this attack. And I'm not going to jump into too many spoilers. One of the cool things about this, though, is it's one of the APs where you get an artifact really early and it grows with you a little bit, which I'm always kind of a fan of. I think that's cool. But yeah, so you're going through this adventure, following this trail of clues and situations to uncover this grand plot where basically there's a giant trying to bring together all of the giant and green skin forces and take over blah, blah, blah. Spoiler, spoiler, spoiler. As far as the story goes, I have to admit it's fairly uninspired. Mechanically, this AP was also a little bit uninspired, but goddamn was it fucking fun at points. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Particularly... Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it just goes to show that it really depends who you're fucking playing with. If you're playing with boys and girls, then shit's good. You can make it good.
Yeah, and I believe, shout out to another podcast, I believe it's GCP, right,
yes,
Matt?
The
did
Glass
this one?
Cannon podcast. This is their flagship show, the Glass Cannon podcast. They have many other ones now, but the first one that they start, and they are now one of the first officially licensed by Paizo podcast. They run through Giant Slayer. I believe they're actually almost done. They took a fat break because of COVID.
Yeah, what didn't? But yeah, they're great. If you want to hear this story in full, highly recommend going to check them out. Even if they weren't, directly tied to Paizo, I've only heard great things about them. They sound like awesome guys. So go check that out. Go check that podcast out. And yeah, I don't want to take too much time on it because we're aiming for 3 episodes here on this stuff. But I do have to talk about our characters and one of the books. I think it was book 4. The Frost Giant Camp Citadel thing was easily, by and large, the best part of the AP.
Skiergard.
Yeah, so without getting into the specifics again, basically, you get to do this clandestine sabotage book where you have to weaken the forces of this frost giant town/military camp to the point where you can storm it. And it was only made more meaningful because we had this, like, this was not part of the AP at all, from my understanding. We had this side plot relating to these witches who were Staffir's aunts, basically. They had stolen Valdak's body after he had died to these weird-ass creatures that were like golems animated by swarms of maggots or some shit. He went down and was killed. And it was early enough in the campaign where you couldn't resurrect him. Like, we were in the middle of nowhere with almost no cash. Like, it was brutal but awesome. Great story point. And they learned that his body was taken. But, oh my god, it was after he had replaced his hand with this magical metal artifact hand, and Staffir, being the creepy-ass witch she was, kept his, like, pickled hand.
Yeah, he kept his hand on his belt after he replaced his hand.
Valdak was the weirdo.
When he died and we buried him, I was like, I'm keeping his hand. I tied it to my staff, and his hand, which used to dangle from his belt, now dangled from my staff. Because I felt responsible. I was the party's healer, and he died on my watch. So I was like, I'm carrying this with me.
Oh yeah. We also kind of developed, I feel like Valdak developed this relationship with a couple characters of, like, he's the big dumb cousin that has weird moments of wisdom.
Yeah.
That impacted people.
He was the big dumb cousin that was sometimes the big smart dad.
But yeah, these witches stole his body, and supposedly they had his body in Skiergard and were doing some kind of ritual undead fuckery with it, basically. So all of a sudden, this sabotage plan for Skiergard also became this get our friend's body back mission, and it became so much more, like, meaningful. Oh, it was so good. This Skiergard itself was awesome on its own, the way our DM ran it, but I think that put some extra gravitas to it. It was a blast. And then also, be careful what you do in the final dungeon. No spoilers, but there may be a way to skip, like, fucking half of it.
Yep. Dan's Life Valdak will never live down the fact that he found a thing, and he was like, what's this? And we just went to the boss.
And then we were at the final boss. Yep.
We're supposed to be, what, a level or two higher after going through the whole dungeon.
You're supposed to turn off the thingy.
Yep.
We didn't even know about that.
Yep.
But yeah.
You beat the boss when you got there.
Yes.
We did.
So a little bit about that fight. Everything's giants. That's not a spoiler. Everything's either orcs or giants in this campaign, basically. So the final boss is a type of giant.
Sprinkling of dragons.
And it basically came down to Valdak, who at this point was resurrected, standing there in his barbarian rage, facing this giant who was standing there in his buffed form. And we literally just started beating the shit out of each other with giant weapons.
And Valdak won. Because
barely.
He had a healer.
I had a healer, and I had damage reduction 3. That was literally the only reason I didn't go unconscious in that fight, was I shaved a little bit off of every attack.
Wow.
God
That's
yeah,
awesome.
no, I eventually... There is a high enough level spell called Resurrection where you just need a piece of him and you can bring him back. We eventually had enough money to pay for that spell, and I still had his hand. So we used it to bring him back.
Ah.
Yeah, but you never let me put the metal hand back on,
refuse.
you bastards.
Well, it's because it drove him insane at the sight of giants in Giant Slayer.
Yeah, basically you had to make a
check.
You had to make a will save, or you were forced to fly into a rage and attack the nearest giant. And we're like sneaking through giant fortresses.
Yeah, no, it was actually very convenient that he died right before we did the super stealth mission on the icy mountaintop.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have to deal with him for that entire book.
Yeah. Okay, let's jump to the next one. I could talk about Giant Slayer more, but I don't want to lose too much time, and I'm going to talk about this next one a bit too. So the next pair of APs we're going to cover happen more or less side by side simultaneously. The first one here is Hell's Rebels, that was released August 2015 to January 2016. And then Hell's Vengeance came out immediately after, February 2016 to August 2016. So I'm going to talk a lot more about Hell's Rebels for two reasons, but just so everyone has context, both of these happen during an event within the world called the Glorious Reclamation, where a group of paladins of Iomade, who's your kind of bog standard good guy goddess, are leading this quest, this Glorious Reclamation, to purge the country of Cheliax from its devilish taint. Cheliax, I think I mentioned in episode 1 maybe, they're basically Spanish Inquisition Spain, if the Inquisition, air quotes, won. They cut a deal with devils for the ruling authority to remain in power, so the country's essentially ruled by devils and devil-bound people. That doesn't mean, there's horrible shit happening in the streets. This is one of those situations where devils are lawful evil. So think of it as kind of like a dictatorship where people have to follow the rules, but if you follow the rules, you're not suffering. You're still prosperous.
You're still living all right.
Yeah, like they've got some weird shit going on that we'll talk about in Hell's Rebels, but basically Hell's Vengeance is the only AP where they're like, okay, play a party of evil characters and fight against the Glorious Reclamation and keep Cheliax in power, which is a really interesting concept, and a lot of people were super excited about it. Unfortunately, the way the AP is written wasn't super great from a lot of reviews. One of the challenges a lot of the DMs bring up from it is if your party isn't lawful evil or on board with being servitors of the ruling house of Thrun, of Cheliax, you're gonna have the problem of, I'm evil, fuck that, why would I do that, I'm out for myself, blah blah blah. And it causes a lot of trouble with what we like to call in our group getting on the boat. Hope you could hear the air quotes in that. Mm-hmm. Basically, if you're playing an AP, it's on rails. No matter what your DM does, to some degree, it's going to be on rails. There's a path you need to take. If that's not fully understood by the party and accepted to get on the fucking boat, follow the rails, then it's not going to be as fun because you have people constantly trying to break the shit. And the DM's going to get stressed out. People are going to get annoyed that they're not moving along the story that they want to see, stuff like that. So, cool idea in concept. It was the first time they tried something, so I don't hold it against them. I think it's a cool idea. I hope eventually they go back and toy with that kind of structure, but from what I've read, it kind of missed the mark a little bit, which is okay. It happens. Not everything has to be a masterpiece. But Hell's Rebels was great. Ooh. So that's happening in and around Cheliax during this same time period. They're fighting this rebellion, this assault of holy vindicators trying to purge devils from the land. Hell's Rebels actually takes place in a northern chunk of Cheliax, centered almost entirely in a city named Kintargo. Basically, the way this starts out is the city of Kintargo has lost their mayor, who was beloved. She was this wonderful woman. Everyone was happy with her. And this city is a city of chaotic creatives. This is where music and art and plays are written. Beautiful wonders advancing culture happen here. That's the premise of Kintargo. And Cheliax, recognizing the danger of this chaotic, potentially rebellious nature of this country, among other things going on, installs one of the branch family members of the ruling house of Thrun as the new Paracount, or mayor, basically. Paracount Barzillai Thrun is the main bad guy. He shows up at the very beginning of Book 1 and basically immediately places the city under martial law. And all these weird-ass laws come out, like you're not allowed to drink tea. Every place of mint tea specifically You're not allowed to, or if you own a place of business, it's like an 11 by 16 portrait of Countess Abigail Thrun II must be presented and visible as soon as you walk in the door. It's like all these weird fucking laws that are super dumb and annoying. Like, your clothes can't be fancier than this much value, and if they are, the Dotari, which is like his SS, if you will come and take the clothes off your back and blah blah. It's fucking wild. It's a bunch of weird ass shit. Martial law gets in place, and it riles people up, and he starts doing these horrible things, and basically the party joins together with some NPCs they meet and creates a rebellion against Cheliax because it's basically killing Kintargo as a city. And you build up this rebellion, you have this base, you meet more NPCs, you work together, you fight against the forces of this oppressive government, and you slowly uncover that the real reason Barzillai Thrun was put here instead of some other generic head mayor, and I really don't want to spoil it, because it's this cool almost mystery that comes to light through doing this rebellion. But it's really fun. It's super interesting. If your DM gives personality to the NPCs, this is a very NPC-driven interaction campaign. You need to be able to care about the NPCs you're working with. You need to care about the city that you're trying to save. It's definitely one where you want to get ingrained in what's going on and feel like it's your place and it's time to make it your own kind of thing.
This sounds like a lot of fun.
It was a blast. It was really fun. For example, one of the players' characters ended up meeting this aquatic elf, and they ended up getting married. Another character had a relationship with one of the NPCs I had thrown in there that was the sister of one of the player characters and part of the rebellion. They like really got connected to these NPCs, and they really got connected to their hatred of Barzillai Thrun, which I think super helped. Oh, it was good. It was really fun. I have a lot of great stories, but I don't want to spoil anything too much. Just if Paizo ever listens to this, please stop making circular buildings. It does not work well with online tabletops.
Small tangent question. You spend most of the time in Kintargo, right?
Yes, I believe specifically there is one book and 2 other chapters, I think, where you're not in Kintargo. Most of it happens in Kintargo.
Just from what I've heard, it seems like Paizo's best games are the ones where they put you in a city and they're like, all right, this is your playground. We're going to go to all of it. Maybe not in the order you want, but this is it. I've heard excellent things about Curse of the Crimson Throne. I've heard excellent things about Hell's Rebels.
I would say it definitely helps. I do see the trend you're talking about, but I think part of that is simply it's easier for players to feel a connection there, and less like they just write better that way kind of thing.
I've heard much less about it, but I believe Council of Thieves is another one that's just in one city.
For the most part, I believe you're
I'd be
correct.
interested
Yes.
to know if that one is also as beloved.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, like, I think Giant Slayer is a great campaign suffering from a very small cast of enemies is the problem.
Yeah.
If the enemies were more varied, I think Giant Slayer would have been fun.
Yep.
Still. Mummy's Mask, it has you move around, and I think people would have a super jazz time with that. But I get your point, for sure.
I definitely wasn't trying to say if they don't stay in one city, they're bad. I was just saying it seems like the ones where they stay in one city are good.
But that's Hell's Rebels. You're just a little bit of a taste is you join the freedom fighting group known as the Silver Ravens, which had fought for freedom before, kind of thing. So there's also some uncovering of what happened there, and the mystery behind the disappearing mayor from the beginning of the game. Great AP. Highly recommend it to anyone who's invested or interested in that kind of stuff. They also have an organization management side system, which I probably could have done more with, but it was okay on its own. It really comes down to, are the players going to get involved in managing their organization, or are they more worried about just playing their characters? Because it definitely wasn't necessary, and you could have just automatically jumped them through ranks that's appropriate. But if you're looking for side systems like that, it's got one in there. It's interesting. Okay, and with that, we've only got a few more, and most of these I have not played through in full. So it shouldn't take too much longer to get through. And again, we're only going through the end of Pathfinder First Edition, because Pathfinder Second Edition is still coming out. The next AP that came out was August 2016 to February 2017, and it's one called Strange Aeons. Aeons, Aeons, however you want to interpret that word. One of my friends who DMs for me sometimes was preparing this campaign to play, and then we heard about Pathfinder 2 coming out, and some other stuff happened, so it got put on pause. This is your Lovecraftian Eldritch campaign, which is why I was so excited when he said he was prepping it to play, and then really sad when it didn't happen. I don't know too much about it because I was going to be a player, so I didn't look up anything. All I know is it has to do with, to some degree, Hastur. Other Lovecraftian things happen, and it starts with you in very Skyrim-y, or very Elder Scrolls-y, in prison cells, not remembering who you are. He was developing this way for us to, we would give him our character name and stats and stuff like that, and this was 2 months before we were planning to start. He was going to build the character sheet, and he wasn't going to reveal the character sheet to us until we had tried to do enough things to where we remembered what we are and what we do. And I'm like, oh, that sounds like such a cool idea.
I had I had an idea once where and I don't know how well it would go over, but if you made all the players make characters with the understanding that they would not be playing what they made, and then just shuffle them pre-game, and then give everybody else characters made by somebody else.
Yeah, I think that's a fun idea as well. And you could even put in, some controls in there. It's okay, person X is going to make person Y's character. Person Y, the only thing you can definitely tell them is what race and class you want to be. Everything else they determine, and just go around the circle and do that.
I was even thinking the way to explain why you know so much about somebody else is that the amnesia was specifically targeted. You don't know anything about yourself, but you each had a connection to somebody else in the party, so that is why you would know about them, and you could help them figure out about themselves. You would each help each other figure out about yourselves.
Well, that'd be interesting. I was just thinking separate player from character knowledge and nobody knows shit, but I like that idea too. It'd be fun to explore. But yeah, that's really all I know, is it has to do with monsters from beyond the stars. There's a cult involved here that I am not going to talk about because it may or may not be influencing something one of these people in this episode right now is dealing with in a campaign.
Well, that was very unvague.
But yeah, it's super cool. If you're interested in Lovecraftian, Beyond the Stars horrors kind of stuff, Strange Aeons for you, for sure. The next one is March 2017 to July 2017, called Iron Fang Invasion. I had just started running this in college with a large group of new players, basically. And this was one of the first campaigns Matt was playing at the time of re-picking up tabletop RPGs, because I know you'd played before in the past.
Yeah, I had played a bunch of random D20s in high school.
Yeah. But this one is one that I'd like to go back to and play at some point in time. Because it shapes the surface of Golarion to a degree. Iron Fang Invasion is about an invasion force of hobgoblins that somehow this enormous metal spire erupts through the ground of a town called Feindar, which is in the Nermathus Multhun region of the Inner Sea lands, which is kind of trying to think of a European equivalent. Not on the coast. It's kind of like in Central Western Europe area. Like, think of that.
Luxembourg?
Sure. But this huge tower erupts from the ground, and this Iron Fang legion of heavily armored and organized hobgoblins and their monstrous forces like manticores and stuff just attacks this town of Feindar. And you slowly learn that it's the hobgoblins trying to claim a country for themselves, trying to make a country. They're invading in the literal sense of what an invasion is. They're invading to take the land and live in it as theirs. And basically, this is a really interesting one because it involves the party fleeing from their starting town with as many innocent bystanders as possible and surviving in the wilderness and trying to figure out how to beat back the hobgoblins. Which is kind of cool. Like, there's not a lot of wilderness survival campaigns out there. There might be a book or a couple chapters where that happens. That's the main premise of this one, is survive in the wilderness with all these innocent NPCs and figure out where the fuck you're going and if you can take Feindar back or stop this invasion.
That sounds like a blast, because that sounds really tricky. And
Yeah.
I feel like there's some things you can probably stumble upon within that help you.
Yeah.
Which would be cool.
And I think this AP itself lends itself to a lot of homebrew interim content. So basically they're like, okay, when the players get to this region, this event happens, and when they explore the forest in this spot, this happens. It's like, well, how do they know those are the spots they're going to go to? Eventually they'll get pointers there, but from the start they could just go a completely different direction. So if you're going to DM this one, be prepared to make your own encounters to some degree, which I think is really fun. As a DM who knows the system extremely well, that can be very intimidating for someone who doesn't know a lot about how to build encounters, how to manage expectations of players, stuff like that. So just bear that in mind if you want to run it. One of the other things I really like about this one, part of it is it explores what's called the Darklands, which, if you're a D&D person, it's essentially the Underdark, which they hadn't done for a very long time in these APs. So there's that. And then also, one of the things I really like about this one is canonically you lose. Canonically, the Iron Fang invasion succeeds, and there is now a country of hobgoblins that takes up some of Nermathus and some of Multhun. And it's just this new country that cropped up. And after they establish their foothold and gain their land, they're not some mindless horde of monsters that continues to ravage the countryside. They're literally building a country. So while they're technically evil and they killed a bunch of innocent people and stuff, they're not chaotic. They're not just there to destroy everything. They wanted a fucking home. It's cool. It's interesting.
Which is
wreck the place, set up some buildings, start up a bureaucracy. You know, soon that you got hobgoblin HOAs. I can dig it.
Well, yeah, because it you feel for it a little bit more. Like, you get it.
Yeah, honestly, it actually... I'm okay losing knowing that
it's not a world-ending scenario.
Yeah, that they were like, alright, we're tired of living underground or whatever. We want a country. What do we do? Well, all land's claimed. I guess we take a country and then act like a country. And hopefully people will recognize us.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I like that. I think if you were a really creative DM, it would be kind of cool to run the AP from the other side and be part of the hobgoblin invasion force, and the final boss is this party of adventurers. I think that'd be kind of a cool way to explore that too, but it'd take some pretty heavy rebuilding.
I've always thought that would be the funnest part of running an evil campaign, is building parties of heroes that like would be the air quotes boss encounters. Like you'd be chugging along doing your due, like taking out mission objectives to accomplish your evil goals, and then every once in a while, in the middle of a very important part of your plan, the DM would get to create a party of adventurers that are gonna come and try to fucking murder you.
Definitely be an interesting way to design it. But we're coming down to the wire. There's only a couple more, so I'm gonna push on. But it's an interesting one. Next one that came out was Ruins of Aslant, August 2017 to January 2018. I have not read a lot into this. I believe we are at the point, Matt is currently playing in this, but I believe we are at the point where what I know falls short of what he knows, so I don't have to worry about spoilers.
Yeah, I can help if you want to.
This AP explores a lot of ancient history of Golarion.
Yes.
Basically, the land of Aslant was the prominent country race existence on Golarion several eons or eras ago.
It's Atlantis.
Yeah, basically Atlantis. It's basically science-y, magic-y Atlantis. And they were more or less destroyed by something called the Starfall ages ago, and that event also destroyed, in most part, their counterpart nation that we had talked about before, called Thassalon, simultaneously. Thassalon was actually a set of countries, basically a ruling party of sin mages that was created from a splinter offshoot of Aslanti people. They didn't agree with the way the Aslantes used magic and thought of magic and behaved, and said, I'm all powerful, why should I have to bow down to a council of rulers, blah blah blah. And they went and made their own country, stuck a flag in the ground, said boom, we're different. But this Starfall event was ultimately huge fucking spoiler right here. I'm going to give you a couple seconds to mute it for about a minute, and come back or skip ahead. Okay. Both of those nations were destroyed by the Starfall, which was an event caused by a race called aboleths, which are these giant whale fish aberrations that are vaguely tied to Lovecraftian eldritch shit. They live in the deepest parts of the ocean, and they were actually the first ruling bodies of the planet. They basically called a big-ass blue fucking meteor down and annihilated all life on the planet, more or less. Yeah. So, roughly a minute's gone past since I asked, so people should unmute or have skipped at this point. But yeah, Ruins of Aslant basically explores the land that's left over after that. And the players get to uncover that's what happened, as well as some other pieces going on. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, help resettle these lost lands to a degree. Is that about right so far, Matt?
Yeah, basically. You help resettle them with people, but as you go around the islands, you find that there are already other things living here.
Yeah, but they're not people, so they don't count.
Uh-huh.
They're fish people and bird people.
Yeah.
They're not people.
We also found a bunch of like little tiny things that live inside giant like bone huts. We didn't really figure out how to talk to them and haven't gone back to them. We don't know what those are yet. 'Cause we went there and they were like very angry and aggressive and thought we were attacking, and so we just left and they left us alone, but we were like, I don't know how to talk to that.
Man, if only you had a sweetheart druid cleric who could have, made them happy and your friends.
Currently, we're under the ocean, stuck between a rock and a hard place. politically.
Oh yeah, that's the other thing about this one is it's an underwater campaign by and large, right?
Yeah. I believe
sounds fun.
the DM has told us that at the point that we are at now, half of the rest of the campaign is underwater. So we are making moves to plan accordingly.
Yeah, and also for context, the DM is converting it from 1E to 2E as they're playing. So experiences may vary. It was interesting. The beginning was super fucking tough. I'm guessing that may have been a balancing thing. Converting from 1E to 2E as it kind of leveled out and felt better as we move forward. But just a warning to any DMs and players for that campaign. Be careful with the first book and a half. Don't want to make it too impossible. But moving on to the next one, War for the Crown, released February 2018 to July 2018. This takes place in the kingdom of Taldor, which is kind of... It's really funny because the language everyone speaks, the common language is Taldane. Taldor used to be the primary, human country after the rebuilding efforts and the resurgence of life, things like that. But it's kind of come down to just another country, if you will. And this actually, similarly to what we were talking about before with Hell's Rebels and some other APs, this takes place pretty much entirely in Taldor. It's one of the few APs where the threat isn't world-ending. You're actually dealing with a threat to the country, preventing it from collapsing into civil war, things like that. I don't know too much about it, but apparently there's some pretty heavy politics, spying, espionage-style stuff. It's less emphasis on combat, more emphasis on other things that an adventurer may be hired to do, kind of thing. That's not to say there isn't any combat, of course. It is a tabletop RPG. But that's really all I know about that one. If you're interested in some politicking and things like that and getting to know a piece of the world a lot better, I think that would be good for you. The next one is Return of the Runelords. This is the penultimate end to the Runelord saga in Pathfinder version 1, released in August 2018 to January 2019. These near immortal Runelords essentially begin awakening. I believe I vaguely mentioned this before, but all of the Sin Runelords from Thassalon had found or attempted to find a way to preserve their life to survive a great catastrophe that would destroy most life on Golarion. They had seen it coming. They found a way to avoid it, essentially. Rise of the Runelords involves the first one awakening and the party defeating them. The Shattered Star involves one or two of them slowly awakening, their forces moving, things like that. Return of the Runelords is, if they're going to wake up, this is the time they're waking up, and the party dealing with that and the outcomings of that. I know kind of the canonical outcome of this, but I don't know the specifics of the adventure because I had always intended to run it eventually, but I wanted to do Rise, Shattered Star, Return. Again, unfortunately, I may not get the chance to do that. But Return of the Runelords canonically ends with at least two of the Runelords succeeding to awaken and not being defeated by the party directly. I.e., they're still alive canonically in the Pathfinder 2 Golarion. And they have created their own country. I'm sure you're noticing a theme. It is ruled by the Runelord of Lust, Sorshen, and she is assisted by the Runelord of Envy, whose name escapes me at this time. But they actually control a large swath of land in northern Varizia using the city of Zin Shalast, which is where Rise of the Runelord, its finale takes place. That is their capital. And it's actually not an evil country. I believe they are chaotic neutral, and they are doing extremely well for themselves in the beginning of the Pathfinder 2E canonical Golarion. It's a nation of trading and prosperity and creativity and culture exports. It's really interesting.
Two things. 1, Runelord Envy's name is Bellamarius.
Thank you.
And 2, before we get slaughtered in the comments, penultimate actually means second to last. So, Shattered Star would be the penultimate. Sorry.
Okay, the finale, the end to it.
I was just preempting comments.
I know, I appreciate it. It feels bad as a communications person to use the word incorrectly. So I apologize if I offended anybody. It's my one whack for the episode, okay?
I feel like there's a difference between being able to communicate and knowing words. And you are very good at being able to communicate. I'm not saying that means that you're bad at knowing words. I'm just saying I don't think one feeds into the other.
Stop it, you're gonna make me blush.
I know words. Don't know communicate. How communicate?
I know words. Fucks up a word.
I do words good.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Matt. But yeah, I think it definitely has one of the more epic kind of end to books going on. So just keep that in mind. I will probably one day, when I have time, go back and convert it and Shattered Star so I can finish the story, but we'll see.
What is that concept in? What is time?
Spare time? Yeah, that's a good question. The next one that came out, which I believe is the last one in Pathfinder First Edition, is February 2019 to August 2019, and this is one called Tyrant's Grasp.
So arguably, Return of the Runelords is the penultimate AP. It's just not penultimate in the Runelords series.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So I think I had mentioned before, there's really kind of two connected large arcs happening, and then a lot of other APs scattered throughout. And they are the Runelord story, which is Rise, Shattered Star, Return. And then there is the Whispering Tyrant, or Tar-Baphon storyline, which is really Carrion Crown. I want to say Strange Aeons might touch on it a tiny bit, but it's not a major playing point, and I don't know that for sure. So it's really Carrion Crown into Tyrant's Grasp. And Tyrant's Grasp is a very interesting AP. There's going to be a little bit of spoilers, but I didn't read through it all the way, and I haven't played it, so I can't get too specific. The beginning of the campaign, all of the players are already dead, because Tar-Baphon has come back to power. He's come back to his undeath, and has fired off a super weapon, annihilating the entire country of Lastwall.
That's one way to do it.
The AP is about the players regaining their life, moving through the Boneyard, and going out to attempt to defeat Tar-Baphon. Now, I believe, as written in the AP, the players succeed by turning his own super weapon against him, ? But canonically speaking, I am fairly certain Tar-Baphon does not lose, and is still in existence and power based on some of the details of the world of Golarion at the start of 2E. So it's one of those things where you have to write the AP so the players can win. Otherwise, what's the point of playing a game if you can't win? I think that only half applies, but a lot of people play these games to win, and that's fine.
I feel like Pathfinder, because it's so story driven, is one where I'm okay losing as long as it progresses.
If you're familiar with fighting games, it's like that. If you play through a character story in a fighting game, every character has their canonical win and lose ending, but only one of those endings is really what happened when the next game comes out.
Yeah. And I think that's fine. And different groups are going to have different desires or wants. You know, there's a lot of groups out there who play to win. They're like, no, I have to beat the final boss. This is a game, and games are designed to be won. And then there's other people who are like, this is a collaborative storytelling tool. And if we fucking die, then we die. Now, to be fair, And the reason I'm kind of offshooting this is that's really most of what I know about Tyrant's Grasp. Just real quick before we get too far off, is you work to come back to life to defeat Tar-Baphon, the Whispering Tyrant, so that he can't spread undeath across the entire planet. Technically, you can win, I believe. Canonically, you are supposed to lose, and the Nation of Lastwall is completely gone. It is now, I don't remember what the land is called now, but it's basically a wasteland of undeath, which is causing problems for the orcs, funnily enough, and Ustalov. And also part of what happens is the Pathfinder Society, which is the NPC-run group, basically, of, researchers and world explorers, things like that. A shitload of their members are targeted and annihilated by the forces of the Whispering Tyrant because they were key in imprisoning him in the first place.
The Gravelands.
So he holds a vendetta. The Gravelands, thank you. So, like in my homebrew that I'm running on Wednesday, Matt and party have met a Pathfinder who was rather disagreeable and rough initially, I think. And I think part of that the players and or characters may not have understood why he's very defensive is because more than 60% of his organization was recently murdered by an evil force. So they're a bit defensive and a bit more secretive, which they already were secretive, at least in my homebrew setting. There are other factors as to why they didn't like the character, but I feel that may have been forgotten or missed in the interaction. But their characters may not have a reason to know that either, so.
Yeah, and my character has a completely unconnected reason to dislike this guy.
Yeah, but to jump back to the kind of overarching point, because we've only got a couple minutes left, and I love talking about this kind of stuff. When it comes down to it, any tabletop RPG setting, especially D&D and Pathfinder in particular, they are games, but they're more than that. They are collaborative storytelling systems. And I think that gets missed by a fair amount of the people that enjoy playing the game for the game. It's not about trying to win. And there was a period of time where I didn't understand this either. Like, you have to go through some phases, I think, as a tabletop RPG player. But it's really about writing a story with your friends. Mm. That being said, if I die in book 4 or 5, or even on the final boss fight, you best fucking believe I'm going to say, hey, DM, can we rewind and try again? I'm fine saying we lost the AP, and that's the canon we'll use in any homebrew stuff, but I really want to know what the ending of this story is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, we actually had that discussion for Wrath of the Righteous, is like, our DM came to us, and he explained, he's like, hey, you guys might fucking die. This AP's balanced kind of funny. I'm looking at these stat blocks, and in order to challenge you, I've got to boost them, but the boosts in relation to what they already have might be too far. You guys might die. What do you want to do if you die? Kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I think we all came to the same consensus of like, if we lose, we lose. That's fine. But I'd love to at least hear the end of the story if we had won, kind of thing. And when it comes to something like that, it's like, yeah, you're there for the story. You're not there to win at that point. If that's what your group consensus is, which is the right thing, in my opinion. As much as there can be a right and wrong way to play, which I don't like the concept of.
Right.
But yeah, tabletop RPGs are more than just a game. That's the point I'm making. Get together with some friends, make your own stories, and just have some fun. Be something different than what you are day in and day out. It's refreshing. It's exciting. Be a nerd. Like, get out of your comfort zone and get there with your friends, because then it is your comfort zone. You're there with your friends and people that you like to hang out with.
Mm-hmm. That's for sure.
Yeah. Just to round it out, the 2E APs that have come out so far are Age of Ashes, Extinction Curse, Agents of Edgewatch, Abomination Vaults, and Fists of the Ruby Phoenix. Fists of the Ruby Phoenix is, I believe, just finished. The last piece comes out June 2021, which I believe is vaguely when we're recording this. And then the next one they'll be working on is something called Strength of the Thousands, which has to do with some kind of magical academy, which would be kind of cool. So look forward to that.
Awesome.
But you guys got anything before I do the wrap up?
Nothing of note that I can really think of. It all makes sense, and it all sounds like fun. I've been sitting here thinking about. I think I came up with a possible character that fits my real life scenario. If everyone was okay with it, that I will talk to you about after the episode.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. No, I basically agree with everything you said. Play role-playing games to tell a story, not to win a game.
Yeah, and for resources, if you're a little on edge about getting into it and you'd like to see it done or hear it done, resources I'd recommend, we mentioned Glass Cannon Podcast. Critical Role is on Twitch and YouTube. Fantastic. Don't feel like you need to be as good as those guys at doing voices. They are professional voice actors.
Yeah, I did want to caveat that.
Yeah, if you want to see some good ass shit, Critical Role does very well most of the time, but that is not your typical table. There's also one called High Rollers, if you're familiar with a YouTube group called the Yogscast. It is an offshoot of them doing D&D. I think that's a bit more typical of your average table of tabletop role players. Also, you got some goofballs, some serious folks. It's a good time.
Also, a lot of people are getting into VTubers now, and a lot of VTubers are starting to roleplay. Like, DMs are finding them and being like, hey, do you want to be in a game? So, if that's your thing, go look to see if your favorite VTuber's in a D&D game. Tons of ways to experience this stuff.
Yeah, and don't feel any kind of pressure either. Like, I think that's one of the big things that turns people off is like there's this expectation of this mountain of rules you feel like you're expected to know before you get started, and you've got to put on a silly voice and behave differently. You don't have to do any of that. You could literally walk up to the table and say, hey, my name's Bob. This is my character, Bob. He's a fighter that kind of knows how to swing a club, and he sounds exactly like me. And if your group's not okay with that, then that's not a great group to be playing with in the first place.
Find a better group.
Yeah. So do not feel pressured to do any of that stuff. And when it comes to knowing all the rules and shit, your dungeon master is your dungeon master for a reason. Ask them questions. If they don't like answering your questions, they should not be DMing, period. A DM is there to answer questions. That's part of the role. So just a heads up on that too.
Also, I learned this the hard way. We just went through all the APs. That's not the only structured form that any of these companies sell.
Yep.
For your first time, far more helpful to use a module, which is like a single dungeon or a little town scenario that takes you through a couple levels, or something that these APs are supposed to take you through a year plus. A module can take a couple months, maybe, depending on how much you want to stretch it out. You could even
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say you can even get some really tiny ones that are just like 3-4 sessions. That's a much better way to stretch your DMing muscles.
Yeah, if you want to be a new DM, that's great advice. Even as a new player, I would say find one of those that someone's running. They're called modules. In some cases, they're also called one-shots. Some of them are even designed to be done in one 4 to 8 hour session. So if you don't have a lot of time, but you're interested in trying it to see if you want to dedicate more, that'd be a great starting point too. But with that, we're overran a little bit. Sorry about that, but we'll wrap it up now. So I've been Dan, and we talked about the adventure path timeline for Pathfinder First Edition here. Hope you all had some good times listening to the stories coming out and things like that. And yeah, thanks to my co-hosts here.
Yeah.
Yep. TJ.
And Matt.
That is Matt.
Have a good time. Have a good time fucking pretending, guys.
Yeah. Thanks for watching and listening to the WAQ Show. Everybody have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you guys. Bye.